Hi, everybody. If you're
Hello.
joining us live, welcome to the first episode of The Round Table, a new show that we created, which talks about everything that has to do with your career, work, being successful in your life, um, all those different kinds of things that we don't talk about on the Coffee Chat Show. On the Coffee Chat Show, we talk more about you and your personal development and if we started out as a working single mom there, so we talk a lot about what it's like to be a parent and a mom. And so the round table brings in the other aspect of my life, which is these folks on the bottom, which is staff agency. We have Josh, who's the president of staff agency, and we have Karen, who you know from Coffee Chat Show. She is one of the managing directors of staff agency. And up in the corner here, we have Clark Wilcox. Clark, go ahead. I'm going to let you introduce yourself so I don't do it wrong.
All right, appreciate it. Well, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm the founder of the Digital Recruiter. So we're a consultancy firm that helps boutique agencies like Staff Agency with their sales and marketing processes. So I've had the luxury of working with you guys for a little over a year now and multiple different facets, and also the co-owner of the Digital Recruiter Talent Group. So we also have our own agency as well. So yeah, happy to be here.
And I have actually been a guest on Clark's podcast where we told the kind of the origin story of staff agency. So for those of you that know me as the Working Coach Mom, which is my kind of personal give back brand, I am the CEO and co-founder of Staff Agency and also the director of project management for Bryn Law Group in Miami. So those are the corporate things that I do. And this is why, and that's most of my life, actually. And I have always been sitting C-suite probably for the last 3 decades plus. So I have lots of experience and know lots of people that own businesses and are in the business world. So we thought for launch today, I would ask the question to these guys, and then we'll kind of riff on their answers, and then I'll give you my answers. My question, and we'll start with Karen, is what are the 3 qualities that you think someone has to possess to be successful in their life and their career, like in their work life and in their life in general? Like what are the 3 characteristics that you think if you had to have 3 characteristics and you could tell somebody if you had these 3 things, it's likely that you will be successful in what you do? And so what would those 3 things be, do you think?
So number 1 is coachable. I think you have to be coachable at any level. There's always something to learn, whether you just started or whether you've been, in this for 20 years. Modest, I was going through my list and I was changing it a bunch. Number 2, I would say modest, checking your ego at the door. Like I have an ego. You all have an ego. Everyone has an ego, but it's checking it and just being modest. And I don't think it's essentially eliminating your ego, because sometimes that does play really well.
Yeah.
But it's knowing that you have one and being able to check it. I think there's a big difference in that.
What is an example of like being egoic in sort of a situation where you should have checked your ego at the door?
If you're in a situation, particularly like as a manager, and I have people that are working, let's say, on a project with me, and I'm overseeing it, and I have the say at the end, being able to check my ego if I think something's right and they don't, or if I think it's wrong and they think it's right, and being able to be, okay, I'm not the one that's right here. Even though if I'm the one in charge, I'm not the one that may be right. And I don't need to keep driving my point over and over again.
So having a collaborative spirit and checking your ego at the door. Okay. Yeah. And say more about, you got one more, but tell people like what's coachable? What does that mean even?
So I'll give an example when I started here at Staff Agency, because I came from a business that I co-owned and ran, and I could basically do whatever I wanted. So I was going from being an owner to being an employee. And when I started at Staff Agency, I was simply a business development manager. Not even really a manager, a specialist at that. So being able to be coachable, right? Like I came from another career and then I wanted to do something different, but I really I had thoughts that I wanted to say and just kind of check that and just and leave it to you all to coach me.
Right.
And you do that in any state and that you're in. So I think it's important.
Willing to learn. Yeah. Same thing, right? Okay. And what's the 3rd thing?
Accountability.
Say more about that.
Say what you mean and what you say.
So is that like walk your talk?
Yeah, like what you do. Like if you say you're going to send out, like if Noelle's like, I'm going to send out a Zoom link, she actually sends it out. I find a lot of people say they send it out and then they won't. I'm just giving an example of that, but people take note of that. And that leads to a lot, accountability leads to a lot others in your life. Like when we played the effectiveness game on the other show, that's accountability.
Right.
That could be simple in your bed every day, but that's going to lead into succeeding.
Accountability like makes people know that they can count on you.
Yeah.
And then that creates trust. And then of course, trust is, at the foundation of any relationship, be it business or personal. Clark, let's go to you next. What are your 3 things?
Yeah, those are good ones. My first one would be mindset, kind of getting over what other people think. You want to care about what the right people think for sure, right, in your life that are trustworthy, managers, bosses, family, friends. But there's also an element of just like, you just have to get out of your own head and just put yourself out there. We're all, sales and have been in producer roles, especially for those types of roles. Like you got to go out and, if you got to drum up business, like you just got to get after it. Right. I think that mindset that you're just going to be determined and have a positive attitude really goes a long way. And just building rapport and relationships and networking, having that positive mindset and that is, and not expecting to always like get right as part of that mindset, like kind of that gift mindset, that determined mindset is huge, because the opportunities in front of you now, right, with that positive mindset, they could open up, even more doors down the road, right? If you just have that patience and just kind of stick with it. And to go into that for the next one, I would say, work ethic. It just a little bit kind of the coachable, and not to work for the sake of working hard, right? You want to be careful. Am I being busy? Am I being productive? But work ethic is, you can't get around it, right? It's easy to kind of talk all day, but you got to sit down and actually get it done, and what's going to move the needle. And I talk a lot about my company this year. Like we have to finish projects, right? Karen talked about accountability. Like are we seeing this through the finish line, or is it kind of 40% done, 70% done? Right. And you kind of be able to get through that. And maybe some of the work ethic is some things you do have to pivot on, right? Maybe a project doesn't make sense or pivots to something else, but you're always kind of pushing, moving the needle. And then integrity, right? Treating people right, working on really treating your customers the right way. Are you living up to your promises of what you sold them? Is fulfillment taken care of, right? What improvements do you need to make there, right? In our coaching program, I'm constantly figuring out, okay, what have we, sold? Are we fulfilling on that promise? What have we learned? Do we need to add things to fulfillment or change things up so people get better results and get more out of it? Integrity is a huge part of that, because you can do stuff that gets a quick cash grab, right? Maybe you make some cash early on, but what are you doing in your reputation long term? So really approaching it with, treating people the right way and being honest, as Karen, as you said, with checking your ego at the door with what your solution is like, is the solution actually working? And are we delivering? Are people getting the result? Because in a coaching program, I could have all this great information, but if they're not implementing it, I have to figure out why. And that's my responsibility still. It's easy to say and put blame on them, but at the end of the day, it's my responsibility. We kind of figure that out, and it just takes integrity. So.
Right. Okay. I like those. Josh, what about you? What are your 3?
I would say resilience.
Nice.
Keep learning, continuing education.
Yeah.
And hard work, not giving up. I know that there was a few more than 3 there, but I'm kind of adding.
No, but talk to me. Tell me about resilience and kind of like what that means for you. For those of you that are just joining us or you're popping in during your lunch hour, this is the first episode of the Round Table, which is our new weekly lunchtime show focused on everything that has to do with work and you being a successful human in your career life, your work life. And we're talking about all things work. And every week we will have a round table of folks. There'll always be a couple of hosts joining me from Staff Agency, which is the company that I co-founded and that I am the CEO of, staffagency.com, little plug for us. We are a workforce development company. This afternoon, we have Clark Wilcox from Digital Recruiter joining us. And the question that I'm asking everyone is, if you had to have 3 characteristics that, if we said to someone, you have these 3 things, you are likely to be successful in your business, in your career, in your life, what are those 3 things? So Josh, when you say resiliency, tell me a little bit, like, what does that mean to you? Or how do you see that?
Yeah, someone who can someone who can rebound from setbacks and adversity quickly, right? Things happen at every angle in this business. It could come from any side, any moment. It's not a very cut and paste or one size fits all type of business.
Right.
So someone who can come back from that very fast, because it's easy to quit and give up or just walk away from a deal or whatever it might be, or the candidate doesn't take the job, or the client says no, or the team has a bad month, or whatever it might be, and being able to be resilient and saying, hey, we're going to get back up. We're going to do better next month. We're going to find other ways to get business. We're going to speak to other candidates. We're going to expand what we're doing. It's so easy to just say no and walk away. So being a resilient leader is so important.
And resiliency is true in every area of someone's life, right? Not just their job, because no matter what happens, like to your point, if the week isn't going well or something's not going well, you want to be able to get back up no matter what and keep going.
Correct. It's like that. It's like that anywhere. And keep learning, continuing, because this business evolves. It isn't like it used to be. There's all types of technologies. There's AI. There are many different job boards. There are so many ways that people know, whether it's networking or job or finding candidates on LinkedIn or Indeed or Monster, Career Builder, ZipRecruiter, whatever it might be, Dice, and continuing to learn, how do I put myself out there? How can I help others? How can I not just do the things that I was doing 10 years ago and evolve and continue learning? And there's so much stuff that people don't even think about it. It's a lot of the stuff that you preach, and the guys we listen to, like Alex Hormozy, people like that, and just thinking outside the box, and how can you expand, and how can you expand yourself and continuing education.
And Alex Hormozy's great at demonstrating like the give back part. He's always like me. He's always putting free content out there and trying to help other people, with everything that he's doing. Antonio, my son, actually turned me on to his stuff, and I really enjoy his books and I really enjoy his approach. And all of the things that Josh is saying, like he's talking about the recruiting industry because that's the industry that he's in. These things are true in any industry, in any career that you have, in any position that you have. These things like resiliency and personal development and continuing to learn. These are all things that are important in you being a successful human being, not just a success in your daily life. My three would be discipline, mindset, and the ability to respond and not react. So the discipline part, with everything that each of these people has said, if you don't have the discipline to put those things into action and the discipline to be consistent, it won't matter. It won't matter what your mindset is. It won't matter if you're resilient. It just won't matter, because if you're only resilient one time, or if you only can change your mindset one time, what the hell good is it going to do you? It's not going to do you any good. You have to be able to be consistent. So you guys give me some examples of that, of like how you see in your careers, how you've seen that consistency like wins. Consistency is something that's important. Clark, how about you?
Yeah, I'll start. I guess I'll start with content, right? So I post a lot on LinkedIn. Noel, I know you have a ton of content out there. You post all the time, and I'm sure you can attest to this. Is some people get nervous to post, right? They make a post, they make two. Oh, it didn't work. I didn't get many likes. I didn't get any leads. It didn't start raining money on me. It's like, okay, well, maybe post 3 times a week for 3 straight months, and then talk to me, and just stick with it, right? And it's
like someone who's on a diet that calorie counted for one day and goes, I'm not skinny, and it's so unforgettable.
How did I not lose 15 pounds? Yeah, I had a salad. It's like, all right, we'll do that for 3 months straight. Then we'll get somewhere, right? Maybe start walking a little bit. So it's I feel like I'm talking to myself here, but it's
are we all always talking to ourselves, really though?
This is a pep talk. But on LinkedIn, and that consistency, and then you start to learn, you learn by just putting yourself out there, especially with what I coach with recruiters and stuff I've talked to Karen and Josh about, I'm sure multiple times, and they're probably sick of me saying it, but just that consistency out there, you don't know what could happen. And I've seen people, I got a message from another client yesterday that's just like, I made a post this week and here's another another lead. It was someone like, hey, you have this experience. We would love to talk to you. I think you offer something that other recruiters aren't offering us. Like, when can we talk? Right. And she just keeps posting, and she's been consistent, and she really understands her market. But you only get that by just putting yourself out there, see what people are responding to, because what's in our head isn't always what we think is going to happen, isn't always what actually happens. And you can be surprised a lot of the times with, sometimes people are surprised with a post that gets 5 likes, turns into, they get 10 leads from it. Right. And the post that get 500 likes, there's no leads. Right. Yeah. So it's kind of, people think, oh, it's about going viral. It's like, really not. It's
about quality over quantity when it comes to your, and engagement too. Like, who's really engaging with your post, and when it comes to the social media stuff, like who's engaging and who's really listening. And I mean, when you start anything, for instance, we are starting the show today. We probably have about 5 people watching us right now. The good news is I have a huge audience, and people will catch up to the fact that we were on, and lots of people can't watch in the middle of the day. So it just so happens it's better for us to do this show all together and get people, on camera in the middle of the day. So that's why we're doing it in the middle of the day. And then the audience will watch whenever they can watch. And then we'll put it on YouTube and on the Spotify channel. There'll be lots of places where people can catch the content. However, if all we cared about was that it looked like we were being a huge success right now, when we see just 2 or 3 people watching live at in any moment, we would just say, forget it. We tried the roundtable and it didn't work. Right. And so the consistency, you've got to be consistent. And they say, right, 80% of success is just showing up. That's the consistency. Just show up. Most people don't even show up. I have news. In their lives, they don't even show up. Most people say, like, oh, yeah, I'll call you on Friday. I'll send you the link. I'll do this. I'll be there. I'll help you. They don't show up. And then they wonder why their lives don't work. And they wonder why nobody can count on them. It's because they don't show up. So if you're just a person that shows up and does something consistently, you're already like way ahead of everyone else. Josh, you probably see this in regards to, what staff agency as a company does with recruiters, like the difference between someone on your team, someone on our team that's like showing up consistently and doing what they need to do versus not doing what they need to do. So maybe you could say something about that.
Yeah, it's setting a goal, developing a plan, and achieving it. So even if it's like setting or planting little seeds, and that's your consistency, and you stick with it. And we do that a lot of times because, like Clark always says, it's not a one size fits all approach. And I notice, like, you post a lot about that, and I think about it because it's not, right. And like I said, when it's planting seeds and staying consistent with it, whether it's doing business development or whether it's doing push-ups or whatever it is in life, you're doing a little and a little more and a little bit, and you're setting a goal and how to achieve it and how to stay consistent. And eventually you will achieve that goal. It could be that you're a receptionist and you want to be an executive assistant. And it's like, all right, I'm going to start out as a receptionist. In 2 years, I'm going to be the administrative assistant. And in 4 years, I want to be the executive assistant. And how do you get to that point? But you have to stay consistent to get to that point. You really have to. It's like that with anything in life. It's, the jack of all trade, master of none, or master of one.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do a little bit of everything, but it really might not get you to the point of what you want to get or where you want to get to. Or maybe it is you want to do a little bit of everything and you want to be an entrepreneur that has hands in everything.
And in that light, you still would have to be consistent with, and then it becomes like personal discipline is a huge place where people are not consistent, including myself. And this is what we talk about this a lot on the Coffee Chat Show. It's one of the reasons we're playing something called the effectiveness game from now until the end of the year. It's like, just anyone that's been following me, I've been doing live shows. It'll be 10 years, and believe it or not, which the whole years it consistently making it, keeping my dad. The 3 very consistent 3 things. Even after a decade, I still have to check myself and keep, and I have to be accountable to people to get it done, which is both sad and good that I notice it and recognize it, and sad that it's a decade later and that's still where we are. Karen, what about you? Where do you see that consistency is key?
Oh, you kind of just stole my thoughts. So let me rework that. I used to want a lot of things and I would do it for a month and then I wouldn't do it anymore. And then I would this has been going on always. So But once my personal stuff became consistent, then everything else kind of followed. And then you kind of like, for me or others, you gain that confidence when you start doing little things, and then it builds up and you're like, oh, I can be consistent, especially when it comes, in our world, like in the beginning, consistently when I was recruiting or doing business development, and I had a lot of hurdles. I had a lot of things that went on in the first 6 months, and you just have to keep doing it, and will work out. But I think what I want to talk about too is not only consistency, but what do you do once you reach the goal? You have to stay consistent. Yes. It's like the 1x versus the 10x of the goal. And I experienced that more recently when I, got into a new position. It's like, oh my God, I got this. I got my goal. What do I do next?
Now what? Which is why, and we talk about this too, like why a personal development plan, why a growth plan is really what you want to have versus a list of goals, right? Because when you only have a list of goals, exactly what Karen just said, that's what happens. You knock them off, hopefully. And then what? When you have a growth plan, you're looking at, okay, what I'd like to accomplish in 6 months, this year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And that's a blueprint that's always changing. I think people get stuck and we'll have a conversation about goals on the roundtable as we get closer to the end of the year, but people get stuck in like, oh, I made these goals and then they don't really fit anymore. So they don't go back to like that plan and revisit it. They just go like, oh, I didn't, forget it. And, it didn't work, or I'm just not going to do that. And they don't ask themselves, okay, what then? If not that, then what? Or if I don't want to take that course, is there another one I want to take? Or if I don't want to learn that language, is there another one I want to learn, or whatever? I just think, I think it's really important to have a growth plan. And this is something that we drive with our employees as well, and something that we're going to drive a little even harder into the new year, like a personal development. One of the biggest ones, but as we sort of wrap this all up, is, like I said, respond versus react. And so I just want to talk about that for a second and get you guys your take on that. So respond versus react is extremely powerful in your life and in business, because most people react. So you lose a client, or you get something from the kids' school, or your bank account balance reads a particular thing, or whatever, and you react. Now all your power is gone. You absolutely have zapped yourself of any ability to create a solution, because you are just wound up and emotional, and you are in a reaction, and nothing happens in there. Nothing. It's like when you're in a disagreement with a spouse or a business partner or whatever, when two people are like, nothing good's going to happen there. Take a pause, walk away, revisit it, like give yourself some time. Responding means, I see what's happened here. Okay, I'm just going to take a minute. I'm going to think about that. I'm going to think about what I could do. I'm going to think about how a decision that I make in this moment will affect the moment, and then how it will affect the future, right? Because what happens when you're in a reaction? When you're in a reaction, you say things you don't really mean. You might make a decision that isn't the best one. You just are not taking a pause. You're not having any white space in that dilemma where you can make a good decision. So you guys say something. I'm sure you've all seen that in your life. So tell me something about that, Josh.
I think a reaction is like from your primitive part of your brain, right? It's like an instinct. It's like as a human, you're ingrained to react. And if you take and it's a very stressful, like reacting to anything is a stressful thing on your body or in your mind. It is, whether it's what I'm having, what are you gonna have right now, and you react, and it's all right. Well, take a step back and think about it, or how are you going to respond? Yeah, it takes away that stress element, because if you take 20 seconds, 20 minutes, whatever, you take a step back, you think about it. How am I going to respond? What can I do? Think about the situation. It kind of relieves that stress from thinking about how to react. But it's a natural instinct to react. But some people react like this. Some people take a step back, and some people don't. Yeah. So I think it triggers something in your brain.
It definitely does. And this is why it's like a skill, right? This is it's a characteristic to develop. It's like a muscle that you have to develop to train yourself to take that pause. Clark, you want to speak to that?
It's very, personal. I mean, for when I started recruiting at Aerotech and becoming a manager, now in the last couple of years, having my own business, getting married a year ago, respond versus react has been like a huge theme in my life the last couple of years, right? As I build a team and build a marriage and a family and everything, it's just everywhere in my day to day. There's a lot of things that have come up and can surprise you, as a business owner, as a leader, manager of people. You always got to think of the collateral damage that you can have with the reaction. Who's that affecting? And people's livelihood depends on me and all that. So they take what I say very seriously, a lot of times. So if I'm just reacting and kind of a little all over the place or not really thinking things through, that sets the tone for then maybe how they treat people or treat clients or whatever, because that's the standard that's been set, right? So it's hugely important, and I am constantly working on it because, as you said, Noel, it is a muscle to be trained, and I feel like I'm still like a beginner at it a lot of the time, because things are always coming up that it's hard, right? Stuff, life and business can pile up, and it can be so easy to just react, but just that discipline to work on responding. Few things are more beneficial to really work on, because then you start to really change that kind of collateral damage, and it becomes then more of a positive thing that you're spreading, and then people around you start treating you as such, and then it allows for a lot of progress with anything.
It's huge what you said about the collateral damage. That's something that leaders, that when I'm training, especially the people here on the bottom of the screen, when I'm training these guys in leadership, it's huge, because it's like I was just saying to them on a meeting this week, like, nobody has the luxury anymore to just like react. You don't have that luxury because you have a whole team of people watching. So we don't have that luxury to just fly off the handle or get angry about. So like, you have because what happens is, if you are a manager in a company, or you're an owner, or anything, or you're head of your family, your people are counting on you. So when they see you just fly off the handle, it could, in their perception, could be the littlest thing, all of a sudden, there's instability. You create instability. So reaction creates instability, and then instability creates distrust. And then that creates problems in families and organizations and companies and teams, right? Yep. Because the biggest thing that you want is, your leader doesn't even have to be infallible. You have to be able to trust them. So you have to know that when your leader or the head of your family or whatever has something occurs, they can express their upset. They can express that they're sad or express that they're disappointed, but they are still stable, right? There's a big difference between me saying to you, Clark, I'm really disappointed about how that turned out, and here's what I'd love to see us work on for the future. Then, Clark, you SOB, I can't believe you did that. Blah, blah, blah. But I mean, I know leaders that do, like something happens and they're just gone. And, or even people in relationship. And that, I don't think nobody's really stopping to, this is where the personal development thing is huge in your life and in business, because if you are committed to developing yourself and adding value to others, right, then you're always looking to see, how can I be a better version of myself? How can I be a better leader? How can I be a better contributor? How can I be a better person on social media putting out a message? How can I be a better dad, a better mom, a better sister, a better wife, whatever it is? How can I be better tomorrow than I was yesterday? And that is a question that people do not wake up asking themselves that question. Most people wake up like, oh, F this is bothering me today. Oh my God, I have to do this. Oh my God, this. Oh my God, that. People are not waking up in a spirit of gratitude and joy. And they're also not waking up thinking about how they can add value. And then people come to people like us and say, my life doesn't work. My career doesn't work. I can't understand why. It's like, it's not that difficult to see, because because how you are in every moment is what you are bringing to you. So if I'm a stable person, I'm bringing stability. If I'm a person that's looking for something good, then more good is going to come my way. If I'm a person that's criticizing my team and talking behind their back or condemning everyone, then that's what I'm going to bring to my door. So as we end I'll give everyone a chance to say a final word. As we end our first episode of the roundtable, we would encourage you to think about the characteristics that the four of us have showcased, and maybe pick two that you don't practice, and maybe begin to look at practicing them on a consistent basis. And if your career or your life is not exactly where you want it to be, if you were to incorporate a couple of these things that we've spoken about today, I pretty much feel like I can guarantee that things will change for you. So Clark, I'll give everyone a chance to say goodbye.
Yeah, it's my one kind of the one word that comes up from everything that we've talked about is ownership, right? Whatever stage you're at in life, just own it. If you're washing cars, working in a restaurant, in a sales job, like own it, right? All of us here have hired people, and I think we always appreciate when someone just owns their situation. It's like, okay, this isn't where I want to be forever, but it's where I'm at now, and I'm going to make the absolute most of it and do it with, kind of with a good attitude. That's typically always the people we want to help and guide and promote and get them in the spot where they do want to be. All these traits, I mean, just take complete ownership over wherever you're at. And that's a great starting point, right? You kind of just do that day to day. And leaders will notice in your life, and they'll try to push you up the ladder. So
yeah. I love that. Josh, what about you?
I would say provide value and don't be transactional. Funny enough, like Mark and I went back and forth on LinkedIn or speaking, and then on Zooms for 6 months or so before we did anything transactional per se. I looked at him. I mean, for instance, Clark wrote to me 10 or 15 times before I even responded to him, and then I looked up his profile. I was like, oh, this guy worked at Aerotech for 5 years, and he was in recruiting, and he's from Ohio, and he worked at the University of Florida and as a football intern or whatever it was. And I saw the value, and I started talking to him, and we were bouncing ideas off of each other. And
that's great.
Clark provided value. Yeah.
So that shows two things. One, providing value. Two, consistency. Clark was consistent and ended up working with us, but it took whatever you just said, 10 months, a year, 8 months, so those are two. You guys just demonstrated those two qualities in your lives, over your relationship with each other. Karen, what about you? Final thought?
Vulnerability. The react versus respond. Like, I react more than I respond, but I know that, and I can work on it. And I'm vulnerable enough to know that's something I need to work on, and saying it out loud. Like, it's okay to say that out loud. People will don't look at you differently if you're vulnerable. They'll look at you differently if you are so hard-headed and you won't look at yourself in that way. And I think it speaks.
Yeah. And people appreciate the authenticity and transparency. It's one of the things over the last 10 years that the audience, has said to me, like, because if I'm screwed up, like, I share it. If something's not, like, I've showed up all kinds of ways on the Coffee Chat show, and I'm just always transparent, and I'm not afraid to say, like, hey, this is what's going on, or this is what's happened, and in a leader, vulnerability is not a weakness. So to Karen's point, and to just close us out, like, a lot of people were taught that vulnerability is weak. And so when you say things like, be vulnerable, especially with guys, it's like, oh no, I don't want to do that. And it's like, look at vulnerability is like transparency, like authenticity. That's another word for it. It's like being honest. It's like, if you're a leader, you're not always together, and you're not always, you don't always know. And a great leader can say, like, I don't know what I say to these guys all the time. You guys, I don't know what I don't know that I don't know. I am not a recruiter. I am a manager and a C-suite person and an operations person, and I do those things phenomenally well. Recruiting, I probably could not recruit you because that is not my wheelhouse. And I'm great at creating relationship, but I am not a salesperson, and I don't really want to be. I don't think it's the highest and best use of me. So you hire people that are smarter than you. These guys at the bottom here, they're smarter than me in their different arenas. And this guy here on the top, he's smarter than me with a lot of things as well, which is why I've, sought out his counsel from time to time. So you can't be afraid to be vulnerable as a leader. So even if you just in this next week practiced some vulnerability, you probably would see a big shift in your own life. It's not a weakness. It's actually a strength. And that's something that a lot of people don't talk about. We'll do an episode, on kind of good leadership characteristics, one of these roundtables. So, I like to keep to time. We've gone a little bit over, so I apologize for that. We're at about 35 minutes. We really are glad that you joined us. If you're watching later on, which we imagine many of you will be, we hope that you'll make a habit of catching us, whether you can catch us live on Friday afternoons at noon Eastern time, or you catch us after the fact. So thank you for being with us. You can check out Staff Agency at staffagency.com. Clark, what's your website? Digitalrecruiter.io.
Yeah, yes, it is. Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
That was pretty good. Yeah.
All right. So check us out. You guys know where to find me, and I'm not really promoting anything. So staffagency.com is a great place to go. We have lots of free information there for all things that have to do with your career. And Digital Recruiter IO, Clark, is a great source for information as well. So we will see you. Karen and I will see you tomorrow morning for the Coffee Chat show, and we will see you for the round table next week.
Everybody.